Hello, my fellow adventurers in agility. What's your take on PvP in your D&D games? I'm not talking about those fake PvP scenarios like the Critical Role Battle Royales. I mean genuine, in-canon player versus player conflict. Personally, I find it stressful, but I've got to admit it adds a certain spice to the narrative. An adventure can already be grand just because of the premise. But when the party faces internal conflicts, not just external ones, the story becomes so much richer. And when I say PvP, I don't just mean rolling dice to see whose character comes out on top. I mean any moment of significant emotional conflict between two characters. In my opinion, for good and safe PvP in D&D, you need a few things. First, trust and psychological safety within the group. Needless to say, if you're not in a trusting relationship, PvP will just make things worse. Second, consent and buy-in from all the players. Everyone needs to be aware and on board that intra-party conflict is on the table, and there should be an understanding about how far they could go. And third, distance between the PCs and the players behind them. The emotional aspect that makes PvP dramatic is also what makes it risky, because when your character feels something deeply, it's not really them feeling it, is it? It's you. Without these three elements, you might end up like these horror stories. I've already done videos for getting buy-in and for figuring out if you're in a trusting group that does not fear conflict, so I'll just focus on the third. In a similar way that you might come up with motivators for your character that are different from yours, you can also get more distance between you and your character if they also have a different conflict style. This is a whole other layer of role-playing you might not have thought about. What's your conflict style? What about your characters? And how about the other character and the player controlling them? But why is this important? First, you need to understand yourself and your character so you know when you're role-playing and when you're just reacting as yourself, thus creating some separation. Next, you need to understand the other character so you can ramp up the drama in a controlled way. And lastly, you need to understand the other player so you can keep the conflict from spilling over into real life. Treant Monk has a video about practical versus theoretical optimization for our optimizer cousins. I'd like to introduce two counterparts for our actor or storyteller relatives: juicy and responsible PvP. Before diving into the drama, it's crucial to know how to do it wisely. Juicy PvP, like theoretical optimization, it maximizes the drama potential on paper. It makes for a story that'll have you on the edge of your seat if you were watching it on TV. But, just like theoretical optimization, it can ruin your game if it becomes unbearable for one of the players. Responsible PvP, on the other hand, is like practical optimization. It's about making sure that while the conflict is intense, the gaming group stays intact. The story might not be as dramatic, but at least it continues. Now let's talk about the conflict styles. The Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument identifies 5 main styles people use during conflicts. Everyone has a dominant style, but we can switch depending on the situation. Understanding these styles and recognizing the other person's stance gives you an edge. You can choose how to respond strategically rather than just reacting instinctively. Every conflict involves an evaluation. How much do you value your goal, and how much do you value your relationship with the other person? Let's look at the first style, which is competing. This is an I win, you lose stance. This style values the objective highly, but doesn't care much for the relationship. This is normally the conflict relationship that exists between the heroes and the villains. You hate villains, right? Now imagine if you're introducing a competing stance in PvP. So be aware, use with care. Straight across from competing, there is collaborating. This is the win-win approach that you always hear about, where you value both the goal and the relationship. But since you want to win it all, you should also be willing to put in extra effort. The third style is compromising. You're willing to give up some of your goals if the other person does the same. It places moderate value on both the goal and the relationship, and it's best used when trying to get either an equitable resolution or a quick one. Directly opposite of competing, there's accommodating. The I lose, you win style. You fully give in to the other party because you value the relationship more than the goal. And finally, we have avoiding. This style places low value on both the goal and the relationship, leading to a nope, I'm out approach to conflict. It doesn't resolve anything, but can buy you time to switch to a different style later. For capital R role-playing, you can intentionally pick a dominant conflict style for your character that's different from your own. But remember, you can and should shift styles depending on the situation. Now that we've covered the styles, let's see how a few different combinations can lead to drama. What happens when two accommodating people get into a conflict? This could actually be more comedic than dramatic. Imagine two people trying to let each other go first through a door. How about a competing person going against someone avoiding? This can create hidden tension, with the competing person frustrated by the lack of resolution and the avoiding person frustrated by being constantly hounded. Now the ultimate head-to-head battle, competing versus competing. Think Captain America Civil War. Be careful with this one in PvP. The last one I'd call out is competing versus collaborating. This can still be super dramatic, like when Naruto was trying to reach Sasuke at the Battle of the Falls. But unlike a conflict between two competing styles, at least one person here is trying to keep the relationship intact and is therefore less risky. Let me share a personal example. In a recent game, my character was in a PvP situation where my counterpart was under a temporary madness effect. She believed everything was on fire and tried to flee. I think her words were something like, "I've come too far just to burn here, I'm leaving." My character, being very goal and relatedness driven, took a collaborative stance. He needed her to stay, but he also wanted to rid her of her madness, so he restrained her with webs while trying to convince her that there was no fire. She tried a bunch of different spells as she tried to escape, but they were thwarted. In desperation, she just cast the Moonbeam spell on herself, essentially to end things quickly. I dropped my web spell to let her go free, moving from collaborating to accommodating, because I didn't want her to unalive herself. She, however, was too desperate and convinced that she was just slowly burning alive, and so she didn't move from her spot. I again shifted my conflict style to competing, because I couldn't allow her to succeed. I waited until the last minute to knock her out before her spell could finish her off. That encounter was intense and dramatic, but also stressful. I paid close attention to how the other players were reacting to make sure the in-game conflict didn't spill over into real life. Fortunately, we were all okay, but I was prepared to adjust my character's actions if I felt any real-world tension brewing. This is an example of PvP that was both juicy and responsible. I don't want you to think I'm perfect though. Earlier in the same campaign, I had a conflict with my spouse's character, and it got heated. One of our other party members had just been kidnapped by a demon lord. My spouse plays a very pragmatic and logical character. She asked something like, "Can we really afford to save her?" My character, again being very goal and relatedness driven, found this like a betrayal. After some conversation, I remember telling her, "If you won't help save our friend, you're betraying us and I will kill you." Both of the characters were acting very consistently with their fiction. The problem was that when I chose to engage in this very competitive and confrontational conflict, I didn't consider that it would lead to some real-life tension. We talked about it later and adjusted our in-game behavior, but that was a case where the PvP was juicy but not responsible. So here's a bonus tip for DMs. If you want to encourage dramatic conflicts between PCs, consider giving them external prompts that might induce PvP. For example, in my game, our DM introduced a temporary madness effect, which helped frame the conflict as something imposed on our characters. It made it easier for us players to maintain a healthy distance between us and the PCs. So what do you think? Do you like to PvP? And how well do they usually turn out for you? What are your most memorable PvP successes and fails? Share your thoughts in the comments. Send this to the PvPers you love, and more so to the PvPers you don't. Hey, I'm Jarek, a Dungeon Master with a hobby in Agile Project Management. If you liked what I brought, please like the video. Appreciate it if you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll know when I drop the next one. If you're wondering what the champ frogs that I've been referencing are, why not watch this video about a character's moving motivators? Until next time, my fellow adventurers in agility, bye.